Okay, guys, we're back. I'm joined with Micol and Christian. They started a new accelerator up in Oxford and, quote, we build world-leading climate ventures from the Oxford ecosystem. So, guys, can you please give me a quick 2-minute intro into yourselves?
I can go first. So good morning, James, and thank you so much for having us. Chris and I always enjoy talking to younger people that podcast and really want to dig into the venture space and the accelerator space in particular. So I am an investor, a climate tech investor. I invest through a fund called Planet Fund, but I also am the new investor of Planet Positive Lab, which is the accelerator that you mentioned. It's an accelerator for the Oxford ecosystem, and so we're both Chris and I are alumni, so we were both very excited to be part of this program that we hope we can tell you more about in this hour.
Yeah, thanks, James. It's great to be here. My name is Chris. I am Micol's counterpart. I'm what they call a recovering academic. I've moved over to the venture side after having studied many early stage ventures for a long time. I think it became time to sort of engage myself and roll up the sleeves and get involved on the other side too. Very, very glad to be here today and keen to tell you more about Planet Positive Lab.
Nice just to get a bit more in the action, right?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I mean, you already get the first characteristic, the fact that you have an investor and an academic in the same room building the same thing, which makes us very complementary. We don't fight as much, even if we're very different and we come from different perspectives. So that's good, at least so far. But yes, I think, one particular thing is actually having both worlds into an accelerator. So having really the deep science that is very important if you want to build something that is tangible and concrete and can make a difference in the world. But you also have the concrete, practical side of a thinking, which is what I bring into the conversation because I was a former consultant, so I know how to build companies. But at the same time, I'm also an investor, so I know what to look into an idea and how I can really help the founders to grow something that is tangible. So I think it is amazing to be here with Chris today. It's amazing to be working on with him for all the last, I guess, 6 months, and hopefully we can have a good summer as well with the accelerator.
No, that's awesome. And I think it's probably a criticism that's leveled mostly at the UK ecosystem is that, I hear some people say there's too many scientists, there's not enough scientists, or there aren't enough operators, there's too many ex-finance. Where do you guys stand on that in terms of who add the most value within accelerators? And if there should be a mix, what should that mix look like?
Well, I think you need to have a little bit of all, it's about creating an ecosystem. And the thing about ecosystems is that they need to be in balance and equilibrium in order to operate properly. And that's something that we strive for as well, because it's not just an accelerator where we say, well, you come in and we'll tell you how it's done, because there's many perspectives to it, and you really need to take a holistic perspective in order to sort of see what are the right avenues for development of new ideas, ventures, but also the talent are part of these new companies. What does it look like in terms of the actual accelerator? Well, it means that we have the young new ventures with motivated and enthusiastic founders, but we also have experienced founders that we bring in, operators, with the support of Founders Factory. We're bringing a group of people along that have built over 300 ventures in the last couple of years, that are really sort of experienced and you could say veterans in what it takes in order to build a proper venture that has longevity to it. At the same time, that is only sort of providing the structure and the infrastructure for building these actual ventures. You also need to have, you can have an idea, but it needs to have a real life application, and it needs to address a real problem. So we're working as well with many corporates, many blue chip corporates, but also maybe less established ones that are smaller and sort of tackling the more niche and forward-facing problems of today. So we're bringing in as well a network of corporations that allow these ventures to engage into maybe their first pilot, their first partnerships, possibly their first customers. And And then there's, of course, the academic side of things. You got the world-leading experts here in the ecosystem that are looking at some of the latest science coming out of universities that bring this very sort of depth of understanding of the technologies that we look at and that we work with. And then there's, of course, the investors, because you need some cash in order to drive forward some of these ideas. And what you see is that some science is very well conducted within the academic setting, but it needs to have sort of a commercial setting in order to be driven into a more standardized and scalable format. So yeah, what do you need? The answer is you need a little bit of all in order to create a healthy ecosystem that will help these ventures thrive.
That's awesome.
And James, to your point of like, if there is anybody more important than others, I think in general, like, this project has various steps, and in each step, somebody is important. So I would say that, at the beginning, when the program, we needed to set up the whole program. So having skills like, kind of being very focused and very structured really helped. So like some personality were more useful than others. But then, there are so many pieces into creating something so huge that I would say that literally like every single person we work with was fundamental in that specific moment. So to the people that they never know if they really add value or things like that into a program, or they feel like they didn't work as much, or like they didn't put a lot of time, or maybe they didn't have a lot of ideas. Like, it feels to me that each of us has a good idea, and that good idea can actually make a difference in a program like that. So I feel like I'm very proud of all the people that work with us. And I feel like all of them were important. Like missing one of those pieces would have make all this thing collapse. So thank you to everybody that really participated in this.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I was going to say, kind of what part of the value chain do you feel you guys kind of add the most value? But it sounds like up and down, right? The science aspect, getting something from R&D more to commercialization, and then providing investment afterwards, if I'm not mistaken. Because I understand that's probably an issue that's come up a lot of times with existing accelerators in the UK. It's like, okay, jump on my 3-6 months course, but afterwards, how are you helping me? So do you guys do any kind of like, once your cohort is to graduate, so to speak, do you do any kind of support around there in terms of helping them find investment, supporting them through later life, Series A, Series B, so on?
Yeah. So So first of all, our program is very short. I mean, we are not a venture builder. We are an accelerator. So typically, people come to the program already with a team and already with an idea. So they just want to test whether this idea is feasible. So that's why we have the corporations that Chris mentioned before that can really help and say, yes, this is a great idea. We actually can use it. Or this is just a great idea, but there's no applicability, so it's better that you focus on something else. So they come, is very short, is very hands-on. So we have found this factory that comes with all their brilliant minds and build a company in 10 weeks. And then in September, we have a demo day. But the way we're trying to do this is that instead of just sending the startup to million investors, which is what typically happens when you have big numbers, we're really trying to create relationships. So what we understand, and Chris is excellent at that, is that you need to build relationship with people if you want to share your story and you want to make them understand what you want to do and why you want to do it and where you're coming from. So I think, yes, to answer to your question, it's just not just 10 weeks. It's actually a long relationship. So we are going to organize a demo day, but then we're also following the companies moving forward. So if they need an introduction and we can facilitate that, we're more than happy to do that. If they need to raise a second round, we are invested in the company. So it's also in our interest if the company succeeds. So we're always going to be there and support them as much as they need us.
That's awesome. And then how much equity do you guys take typically?
Is a range. So given that a lot of the startups that applied are in different stages of their life, it depends on their valuation. So we are putting some cash. So we're giving them a salary because a lot of those people are students. And so they didn't raise any funding. So we want them to have a salary so they can focus on this and not worry about paying rent. So we're giving them a salary and then we're giving them all this ecosystem of services and access to people. And then the equity is between 1% to 5%, depending depending on what's the stage of the company and their valuation. Of course, like there are some technologies that are riskier than others because there is just an idea on a presentation, nothing else. And so that's why, probably our percentage is a little bit more on the 5 than on the 1%. But other startups that actually apply, they already have a team, they already raised a round of financing for which, our percentage will be a bit lower. We don't believe on a fixed rate. I think everybody has his own journey, as I was saying before. So it's really important to respect people's journey and try not to get advantage. We know that some accelerators get up to like 15% of a company. We don't want to kill them. We want to actually, invest in them and support them.
Yeah, James, I think it's important to understand sort of what our perspective is and how we come into this, because you really should see it as conveners of this ecosystem. And we're taking very much the perspective of the grassroots, of the ventures. We've seen too many of our friends and colleagues moving into banking or consultancy because they couldn't develop their technologies further in the academic setting, or they just got a salary offer that was 6 times the one that they earn in academia. But it means also that you got people that are working on disease, climate, hunger, inequality, moving into jobs of finance and consultancy. And nothing wrong with that, we need that too. The only issue is if somebody's working on something that is really, that could really thrive in a setting where they can standardize and start scaling this more, but they simply don't have the means because maybe you're on a postdoc salary and you cannot afford that £15,000 in order to apply for an IP. It becomes very complicated to go down that route. And what we really try to do here is to facilitate a setting where these ideas can come to fruition. So we get these people that very often come from an academic background. Some of them are a bit further because they're alumni sort of coming back into the setting. But we really sort of want to provide them with a format where the chances of success for their idea and their venture are as high as possible. And that means that you need to create on one hand, it's important to take a sort of a stake and to take some sort of ownership over that process as an accelerator, because what you see now often is that, and I'm not naming names or not giving examples here, but they come in and there's sort of a general perception of what the stake should be at the very end in terms of the ventures and the commitment. What we try to do here is really create a tailor-made support system. So the size of our cohort is also smaller than what you normally see with your average accelerator, because we really believe in order to make this a success, we need to commit a personalized approach to each and every of these ventures.
Yeah, I think sometimes with accelerators, I would say, particularly in the US, it's almost like a rubber stamp, right? It's almost like, I worked with these guys and this is going to help me get, investment in the future. And this is something I can wear on my CV forever instead of actually adding value. I just want to know as well, I know when we last spoke, you guys talked about all of the interviews you did. So you said at the time you'd done like 50 plus interviews with startups, trying to understand what their needs were. I wanted to know if you guys had like kind of top 3 things that stood out that everyone said, yeah, we really need this. We don't get enough of this at the moment. And whether or not you're implementing that.
Do you want me to go first, Chris?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing that was very interesting, Chris and I reflected on it, is that a lot of people that apply already did an accelerator program before, and they were like, we just didn't get the climate support. So even if there are other accelerators that focus on climate, it seems that a lot of the knowledge on the program was just on the business, but not on the climate side. And climate companies are a little bit different from other companies. They require, for example, teaching on regulations, on which capital stack is available for R&D. Like a lot of the climate company are deeptech, right? So they have a little bit of a different structure and they require different support. So that's the first thing that really came into my mind, because it was like, okay, how come that you need to start another program? And it made me very happy because Chris and I and Jamie spent a lot of time to create a program inviting the best climate expert in the world. So I don't know if you know that, James, but there are 3 pillars in our program. One is the business side with Founders Factory coming and building the companies. The second pillar is the planet. So every Friday morning, we are inviting a panel of like 3 to 5 experts from all around Europe that come and talk to the startups, and they really they're really like hands-on. So they explain how operation work, like what are the issues, what are the challenges, so they can really add a lot of value. And I think that's what a lot of the people that apply were looking for. But also we have a like people pillar. So we are teaching startups, like founders, how to be a founder, also on the soft skill side. So things like negotiations, sales, leading a team. So the second point is like, yes. So the first one, like lack of climate. The second one, lack of soft skills. So a lot of people were like, okay, can you help me write an email? Like, are you teaching me how to write an email for a first customer, for example? You know, like things that it is true. Like even for Chris and I, when we started, we had to learn those things, like how to approach people, how to write them, how to not be too salesy, but yet to add value. So like, I think those soft skills are really not, you know, people don't focus a lot on them, but they're really critical for the success of the company. And the third thing is like, and that also was very interesting, they were like, is it in person, right? We don't want to do an online program. And we were like, and this is also something that Chris and I reflecting a lot on, because a lot of the program now are online and people maybe don't like to travel. They're used to Zoom and things like that. But everybody were like, we want to come in person. We need to be part of a community. We want to be there. We want to be able to talk to you in person, like, you know, getting to know our colleagues as well, learn from them. So I think that, yeah, those are the top three things that I noticed. And I hope Chris may agree with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to as well maybe highlight here that the way that Planet Positive Lab is set up, it's a partnership. And the interesting part is here that it's this partnership was sort of instigated by one of the Oxford colleges, Wadham College, and they have a very progressive outlook in terms of what is needed in order to make science more relevant to society. And it's a very unpopular number, but the Royal Society did some research and saw that 97% of all the science PhDs in the UK end up somewhere else in academia. Yet it's one of these topics that can be tough to discuss with your PI or with your professor as you're doing your PhD or as you're working on your postdoc. So what you see is that we have a system where we're not really supporting the majority in thinking through how what aspects of your skills are actually translative skills that also translate to other applications than just academia. And it can be, for example, as Micol mentioned, and how do you write a simple email, or how do you present your ideas in such a format that taps into the bigger picture, that is not that very sort of niche academic application, but becomes understandable to those that maybe are a layperson when it comes to certain developments in industries. And a large part of what we do is as well helping to formulate these ideas that these people have, because the ideas that they have, they are way better than either of us would be able to think of, and really sort of facilitate that translation and that bridge into something that becomes understandable and becomes something that can actually take shape and become investable and may influence policy or may change industries in such a way that it becomes comprehensible.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually, because it's definitely something I see a lot of, even people kind of asking me from my time in finance to kind of help me out with the pitch deck or whatever it may be. And it's going to be like a kind of deep tech software founder typically. And they send me a 40 page pack of all the stuff that's, in their technology. I'm like, well, how the hell? Even the most, astute investor who's really into cybersecurity, for example, is not going to read this, right? They want that 10, 15 easily digestible thing. So I guess my next question would be kind of, is that the typical profile of someone that would come into the cohort? Or, do you have a checklist that you go through? Are there certain qualities you look for in people that are applying?
And with a certain profile, you mean sort of what is the typical founder that we see?
Yeah, like kind of what is the typical founder that you see kind of apply, and where their skill gaps are? And then maybe as a secondary question to that, kind of what do you guys want to see in someone applying that you kind of jump on and say, this guy has potential?
To be honest, I think that's a tough question, because we get this is our first cohort, and we've got a huge variety of founders that applied. So we've got people fresh out of grad school, mid-20s, really sort of passionate about a certain problem, trying to tackle it. still sort of figuring out what the right way is to do that. But I don't know, maybe it's 2 co-founders working on something like that. Another example is we got people coming back into sort of the Oxford ecosystem with 20, 30 years of experience and saying, well, actually, I've now gained a lot of industry experience. I've tried the corporate side, but I see actually not enough is being done about this particular issue, and I'm now here to tackle it. So I think in that sense, it's difficult to find a common denominator in sort of the founder profile. But if I had to pick one, I would say it's maybe 2 or 3 in that sense. It has to be conviction and drive. So you need to find, I think, people that are really sort of committed to making this work. And what you will see, especially with these sort of early stage ideas, is that it's really sort of the team and the founders that you only can go on, because yes, the idea is great, but the idea will only become something that can become a venture or an actual innovation that can have a disruptive impact if it's truly driven by the founders. And having said that, I think it's also maybe to push back a little bit on sort of the romanticized idea of being an entrepreneur, because nowadays everybody, you probably know these TikToks about, the 5 a.m. club, and you join and you build your idea, and if you get up early enough, it will be a success. But it's really sort of, it takes a conviction and a drive, because Micol often says that you will have more lows than highs, and it will take several years before you actually see it through, and you can develop something that can actually successfully start looking like a business. And what you often see is that there's a misconception in terms of the idea of commercialization, because commercialization often seems to be confused with monetization. And only if you do the commercialization well for many years, maybe you will have a chance and a shot at getting that actual monetization that comes out of the venture that you build. But you need to be resilient. It takes a lot of conviction, and I think you need to be incredibly stubborn too. So if there's any common denominator, I would say it's that.
I think so. To your first question, I was putting together yesterday the deck for the investment committee. We're having an investment committee tomorrow, and I was looking at, I have all those like people on the slide, and I was looking at the differences between each other. Is amazing. And it's probably directly correlated with the Oxford ecosystem. So I'm not taking credit for it, but so many different colors, so many different personalities, so many different type of ages, as well as Chris was mentioning, is amazing. It looks like this beautiful puzzle of how the world looks like, which gave me a lot of hope on the cohorts and on also what this Planet Positive Lab can mean as a legacy for future accelerators. On your second point, I think I'm interested in balance. So I do understand that kind of characteristic like resilience or passion or things like that are very important. But I think what I started looking into founders is balance in terms of work-life balance, for example. So in order to be able to build a company in pre-seed stage, you need to be able to kind of set boundaries, because otherwise building a company takes over your life. You're going to burn out by the end of the summer, and then we all lose, right? So being able to say, okay, this is what I need to do, but then I also need to find time for myself. That's, to me, is very important. So a lot of it's true. Chris and I spent a lot of time with the founders to getting to know them as people, because it's not just about the technology. We trust that they can build something amazing. The majority of them are PhDs, so we trust them on the technology. But it's also important to have the right personality to kind of be the founder of a company, and to be is also balanced in terms of leadership. So it is important to know how much to push your colleagues, but also how much to kind of push less when other people may be struggling as well, or maybe have their problems, their daily issues. So I think being a balanced founder, to me, is really what I'm looking to invest moving forward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's pretty well understood. At the pre-seed, it's all about well, the early stages is all about the team, the character. Can they, their idea might be a bit rough around the edges, but if there's potential there in the team, I'm sure they can pivot and make something of it. I would like to also talk about, what you guys are seeing in the market, and maybe if you guys have a personal thesis around climate. I certainly do. Maybe a good place to start would be kind of, do you see hardware or software as a solution? And kind of maybe a blend of the two, because I've spoken to VCs alike who some of them are adamantly we have to deploy hardware, we have to invest in these 10 plus time horizons, and other investors who are saying there's only value to be created within the software industry, as it has done for the last 10, 20, 30 years. So yeah, maybe starting with Chris, I'd love to hear your take on what your kind of general thesis towards climate is.
Yeah, I probably will give you quite an unsatisfying answer, because I think you need both. You need both hardware and software. I think at the moment what you see in terms of accelerators is too much emphasis on software. I think we need to do more hardware. Maybe it's a bit less sexy, because you need to be more patient. Yeah, you need to have more patience in order to sort of start developing hardware. It often takes a lot more cash to make that happen. Hence, the risks in terms of success might be, in that sense, a little bit slimmer than if you got the next sort of software solution. So I would say it's a balance of that. But I would maybe like to go beyond sort of the idea of hardware and software, and I would maybe sort of like to take a focus as well in terms of geographies. Because what we often see is that we're building a lot of capabilities in terms of innovations here in the West. Having said that, I think about 80% of the world population is based in the global South, and it's really important to sort of to sort of generate these capabilities that we have in the West as well in the global South. Because at the same time, what you often see is that the latest sort of increase in CO2 has been it's the upcoming economies. At the same time, we have absolutely no right to sort of deny them that any form of innovation and economic growth. The thing that we can do is together look at ways that we can sort of generate that economic growth and innovation in ways that is more sustainable to the planet. So I think it's absolutely paramount that we generate capabilities that are also applicable, if not generated in, and that's really what we should focus on, generating capabilities that are sort of very much anchored within the global South. So in terms of your question, yes, both to hardware and software, but I think we should as well look at what the geographical spread is of where we generate these innovations and where we offer these solutions, because the fastest growth in terms of economics is going to happen in the global South in the coming years. So it's great that we find the solutions here in the West for the West, but I think we should really sort of focus and emphasize the importance of helping the global South and finding their way in a more sustainable fashion than we did.
Yes, so I think to add to Chris' point, by the way, I agree 100%. A lot of when we interview the cohort, we were asking them, so what do you think can be the scalability for innovation? Can we apply to all the world, or is like a localized things? We really wanted to find solution that can be, first of all, they can be affordable, because the premiumness of technologies is a problem, right? It's like a lot of people cannot afford it, so they needed to be affordable, but also they needed to be kind of applicable to the global North and the global South, or at least being able to kind of push forward also a solution for the global South. To your question on software and hardware, I think that I have a couple of horrifying stories that I can share with you offline, but investing in software is easier, because understanding software is much easier, and there are many more people that can run a due diligence on software, because software are they have some basics that go across industries. When it comes to hardware, it's different, right? So hardware, you need to understand the science behind it, and a lot of investors don't have a scientific background. They don't understand it, or they don't know anybody that can do the due diligence. So a good thing of being also at Oxford is that, of course, also Chris and I don't understand every single scientific technology, but we have people around us that can help us with that, right? So that's, I think, the power of having an ecosystem like a university around an accelerator. You need to spend more time. You need to really understand the science. And a lot of the time, is a hard conversation to have with the founders. And so people are like, okay, I don't have time, particularly in pre-seed, when it's one investment after the other, you don't really spend a lot of time into thinking about it. And that's why, people typically invest in software, but this solution, 40% of the solution needed to fight climate change still have to be invented, right? So that means that there is a lot of hardware, there is a lot of biotech, there is a lot of science that still needs to, be transformed into a company in order to find, help fighting climate change. If you want me to give you a couple of industry, I think, and it's something that I haven't seen a lot in our accelerators. So this is just a call to action. If anybody has an idea, is on the cement industry. So the cement industry is huge. And the cement is needed. All our infrastructure is based on cement. Our building, our streets, everything is actually built on cement because it's cheap. It has an amazing characteristics, but yet to make cement, there are a lot of emission in the whole supply chain. I think it's like 8% of all world CO2 emission come from the cement industry. So it is huge. And if we think that now with a lot of the disasters that happen, think about Italy, where those big flooding that destroyed a lot of villages, those villages need to be built again. And what do you build them from? Cement. So it is important to find a solution for cement. And I'm not saying it needs to be a new material necessarily, but it's just a matter of creating cement in a more sustainable way. So that would be my first vertical. The second one, and I keep saying that, and again, I haven't seen a solution, is to reverse ripening. In the sense that food waste is a big problem, and it's not just an environmental problem. This is a social, security problem, because a lot of people, die of hunger while tons of waste is created every day. So how can we maybe reduce ripening, slow ripening a little bit, or, in my beautiful world, actually reverse ripening, so we can keep more food into the supply chain and we can feed more people. And the third thing I would like to say is and there are people already working on it, I just have not seen something that is tangible yet, is creating energy from movement. So we move so much, and moving and walking and running is something that actually keep us healthy as well. So this is to say there is a insurance incentive to actually move, but yet we create energy from movement, but this energy is not captured. So how can we build system for which movement can be a new source for energy creation? I think that's are the three pillars that I would love to see some solution. I would love to invest moving forward.
No, thanks for that input, both of you. That's really insightful. Chris, I love the points you make about kind of applying technologies, to where they're most needed and not just keeping it within the first world. I'd love to hear maybe your take on that as well, and Micol as well. Your points about the industries. I think two more would probably be kind of sewage waste. If you look at the waste in a kind of high level, I think kind of material waste and heat waste as well. So I was speaking to, a guy who heads up a kind of investment arm of a steel manufacturer, and he was saying all of this, okay, it's all very well, having renewable energy to create our steel and, by further extension, things like cement and harder materials for buildings. But if we're wasting so much of the heat that goes into the system, what's the point? Because it's still a very inefficient system. So some kind of technology, heat pumps are on the rise as well. A similar technology that can kind of capture this heat and reuse it would be very interesting to me. And on top of what you've just said in terms of kind of food waste, can also be reused. So I understand probably the end goal would to be to make, food last longer, but there will always be that small proportion that's going to be waste. And how do we use that waste responsibly? We can create biofuels out of it. We can use it for, again, heating, for energy and stuff like that. That's another really interesting space I'm looking into personally as well. I would love founders to reach out if they're doing anything in that regard. But Chris, just to come back quickly to the point you made, do you think there's any good strategy for doing something like that, to providing technologies to country in the global south, countries lesser off, because obviously it's a huge kind of regulatory government minefield almost to actually get these technologies over. Have you seen any kind of actionable way that this can be done practically?
Yeah, and I think it's always a sort of a common misperception that we should bring the solution there, because there is a lot of expertise that is local. There's a lot of probably a way better understanding of what the needs are than that we actually have here. So I think it's really important about creating local capabilities and using some of these aspects of knowledge in order to create solutions. So if you talk hardware, software, maybe we should add social to that as well. Because one of the things that I think are important, and maybe this is not a concrete example, but I don't think there's a simple silver bullet solution to climate change. It would be amazing if that was the case, but I don't think there's such a thing. So it's really about creating maybe ways that are more sustainable in terms of development. And part of it maybe is ingrained in knowledge. But it also means that you have to very much sort of base that on existing local knowledge. It's often what you see is that we bring these ideas from the global north to the global south, and we destroy a couple of economies along the way. So I think we should avoid something like that. Having said that, it means that there is maybe ways that we can think about. Let's take, for example, smallholder farmers. 80% of the arable land in the world is farmed by smallholder farmers. What are ways that we can help them improve their yield, so we can maybe solve part of the food issue? That could maybe link to data. How can we sort of think about the ways that climate has impact or is changing sort of the setting of particular type of environments? Maybe that ties in with remote sensing. Another solution might be parametric insurance. So we sort of start paying out before maybe a climate disaster happens, so people can start anticipating it. So I think there's different ways to creatively think about it. Having said that, I don't think that we will find the solutions here. I think the only way to do that is to work with all these different parties, and I think each party can learn from each other, also in terms of geography.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the idea of just continue expanding out that ecosystem and not being this kind of savior that comes in and forces technologies onto people, but actually working with people directly in the community. I really like that. So, guys,
maybe to your point, if I can use maybe one example, the late Professor Steve Rayner, who was here as well at Oxford, he would look at indigenous knowledge, and one of the ways that he looked at is, for example, if you compare the Netherlands to let's say so one of the countries in Southeast Asia, in terms of sort of battling the sea, in terms of what we had in protecting the country against rising sea levels, we would create dikes and we would generate boulders, so we would sort of reclaim land from the sea. As where if you, for example, look at Southeast Asia, they had the solution of saying, well, actually, maybe we should make the houses float instead, that we sort of reclaim the land. So I think there's smarter ways to think about it, as where one maybe is way more agile compared to some of the existing conventional solutions that we have. So I think there's different ways that we can learn from each other.
I also, if I can add something, James, looking at our cohort, sometimes there are people from the global north and the global south coming out with the same solution. So I'm thinking about decentralized energy communities, for example. We had an application from a group of people that want to do it in the US, but at the same time we had an African founder that wants to do the same thing in Africa. So this is to say that it is true there is a development gap as well. So there is some technology that can be transferred from the global north to the global south, but a lot of the time there is not really a difference, in the sense that the ideas are very similar. They're just applying different geographies by different founders, but they're very innovative at the same level. So I think there is a lot that people can learn from each other, and there are a lot of best practices that can be shared also from the global south to the global north.
So it sounds like it makes perfect sense. It sounds like a big roadblock then is actually getting the kind of the investment and the money and the resources over to people that need it most to enable them.
Yeah. So that's the problem. There is not the same amount of capital that goes to the global south. So, for example, I was as I was telling you at the very beginning, we're already trying to introduce some of our startup to investors to kind of help them build a relationship and really, be part of the venture builder. But there are not a lot of investors in Africa, for example. There are some, but not the same amount of people that you have in the UK, for example, or you have in the US. So I think the capital gap is the biggest challenge. Is not the lack of ideas, is not the lack of entrepreneurship or the lack of people that actually, may be educated in Europe or even educated locally, and they want to start entrepreneurship project, which, by the way, I think is also very connected to their culture. I mean, in Africa, the economy is small and medium enterprises. So a lot of those founders have family who actually are entrepreneurs, so they know how to run a business, which is an huge intellectual capital that in Europe we don't have. Like a lot of our family are not necessarily entrepreneurs, because there is a sort of social state where you work for the government, you work for institution, you work for big organization, but you're not an entrepreneur. So the capacity of the global south to actually build companies is huge. It's just a matter of giving them the right tools to unlock it.
I find it so fascinating, because you see a lot of people kind of in the EU or the UK complain about the lack of investment we get here compared to the US. But no doubt there's so many people in Africa, for example, that look at us in exactly the same way, right? Are you guys, would that be some kind of long-term strategy then to strike up partnerships, have people with feet on the ground in these countries? Either of you, sorry.
I thought you were about to speak, Micol.
No.
Yeah, I think it's definitely sort of a part of what we want to look at. In terms of what we're building now, I think we do have to say this is the first time we're doing this here in Oxford in this type of way, this type of partnership and form and shape. So there's still a lot of things for us to learn, before we can start looking beyond that. I think primarily what sort of our next step would be is to really sort of establish this program in Oxford. Build it further out, very much with the same mandate as that we started it, so still very much sort of personalized and tailor-made. But I think we're already sort of receiving interest as well within the Oxford, especially within the Oxford community, from, for example, African entrepreneurs that say, well, maybe there's more that we can do. Maybe there's more of sort of the aspects that we have here that translate in different ways and directions. So I think it's definitely something that is top of mind in also in the type of ventures that we want to take in, the type of entrepreneurs we want to enable. So I would say yes. And to your earlier point of whether there's enough investment in Europe, I think we got plenty of capital here. We got plenty of ideas. We have plenty of talent and plenty of mentors. I think we just do a fairly poor job of putting them together in a way that it becomes a very fruitful interaction. And I think it's not a problem that just us are trying to tackle. I think there's many people that are trying to work on it. And I hope that everything together sort of will generate a certain momentum where we create the better capability of bringing these different aspects together.
No, it's fantastic, guys. Really looking forward to seeing, how you develop. I wanted to touch maybe on one more area, which is kind of something that, we've seen throughout the time that climate has been a hot button topic, which is greenwashing, and people kind of coming into the space and, claiming that they're doing something that's positive to the environment, but it has no real traceable benefit. How do you guys advise startups to avoid these kind of pitfalls? Because it's something we see all the time, or I see personally, when I talk to different VCs who invest in climate, particularly around the software area. A lot of these, if you want to say, kind of copy paste platforms that don't really do anything for the climate, but maybe have that feel good factor of, I'm doing something sustainable, I'm helping someone out somewhere that's, it's not really traceable, the impact I'm having. How do you guys advise startups to avoid starting these kind of businesses?
So I think, Chris and I are in a little bit of a good position, because all the startups that apply to our accelerator are building something for the planet, right? So they actually, their impact, the impact of their services or the product is pretty tangible. So, so far we didn't have any startup that actually applied and we were wondering whether there was an impact or not, or if they were greenwashing or not. We do have a masterclass for it, because it's not just about So a lot of people greenwash in our sector on the product and services because they know that they can unlock capital, if they say that their product or service is impactful. But there is some greenwashing that can also happen in operation. So they can just say, for example, okay, we're using renewable energy to build whatever, and it's not true. Or they say, okay, we're using, like, I've seen a company the other day that was saying, oh, we're making this super green, the greenest houses in the world. And then they were not made by wood. They were not, there was nothing green about those companies. And I was like, what? I mean, building these houses. And I was like, what are you talking about? So it's about the product and service, is about the operation. And we have a masterclass. So we're inviting some of the most expert head of impact in some of the biggest funds in London to come and explain to the startups how to actually account for it, because investors are asking for it, how to account for it in a transparent way, in an accurate way, as well as how to think about the ESG, right, on the operation. So which parameter are material on the environmental side, but also which parameter may be material on the social and governance side, so that they can set up companies that from day one are actually responsible and sustainable for real. And this also answer the question like us, I would say. In general, when I make investments, I think it's easy for me because I'm a head of impact as well. So I've seen so many, I can spot them. I think the danger is more like corporations that greenwash, because bigger corporations than greenwash actually set a low bar. And so startups feel like, okay, well, if that corporation said that, I can also say that, and is legit, when it's not true. So I think the problem is more on educating the blue chip companies on how to stop greenwashing, so that the new generation of companies don't get inspired, don't feel like that's an acceptable standard, and therefore they actually don't take some of those really bad practices on board when they build a company.
Maybe call me cynical, but I don't think education and blue chip corporates go hand in hand, to be honest.
Yeah, that's why you need regulators, I guess. And I think the European Union is doing a great job, but I also think other governments are moving forward.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear your views as well, Chris.
Yeah, I think part of that, maybe to build further on it, I think it's also important to sort of work with blue chip firms on solutions to climate change and to provide innovations. Because what you often see with these sort of large firms is that even if there's the will to sort of make that change, they might not very well have that particular innovative capability in-house in order to generate the solutions to that. So what you will see is that there is sort of a real need for these early stage ventures to come out, sort of scale a little bit up to the point that the ideas or the ventures can be absorbed or can work with sort of these blue chips in order to generate innovative solutions to some of the common problems there. Because I know, as much as we know that cement is an issue, as much as that we know that the steel industry has an impact, as much as we know that oil and gas has an impact on the climate, those companies are not going to go away in the next 5 years, So I think really the only way to make this stick is as well to work with some of the incumbent firms in order to sort of tackle some of the problems that they are facing, that society is facing in a way that is maybe a bit more collaborative.
Yeah, I think I accept all of your points 100%. I do think a lot of the time with corporations, obviously it comes down to cost as well, which is why I'm such a big proponent of deploy hardware. And hopefully as the cost comes down, as it has done with solar panels, for example, over the last kind of 10, 20 years, people actually adopt it, not because, they feel like they're being forced to or because they have to, which is honestly, I think a lot of people's view towards pressing issues such as climate change is like, oh, my hand's being forced and maybe eventually I have to switch over. So I'll make slow steps into implementing it. But actually having that kind of lower cost driver on a unit economic basis of, oh, this is actually beneficial for me to implement, can only really be achieved by startups deploying, right? Is my personal view anyway, to drive up the innovation curve. Sorry, I know you have an opinion on that.
But having seen the profits last year, I don't think costs, at least for oil companies, should be an issue, right? Make some investments in renewable energy.
I think disparity is definitely important. That's what I was telling you before, like affordability. But a lot of the time, price parity comes with scale. So I think, I understand that for some corporation can be a cost at the beginning, but like the intangible revenues that actually can happen by pushing for scale and therefore helping take the price down is massive. So I think they should, like a lot of corporations, because of how budgets are structured, by the way, they always look at the 18 months. But if we look at the 5 to 10 years, then the conversation is much different.
Did you find that big corporates are buying into this at the moment?
Some do, other less. I think there are. I agree with you that regulation are driving this, but I also think leadership is doing it. So sometimes there are a corporation with incredible leaders that instead of thinking, okay, am I going to be reelected? Is the board going to, kick me out or not? They actually care about result. So they push, they make difficult decisions, and sometimes that history doesn't give them enough credit, but they're actually driving corporation change, and they actually are part of the sustainability conversation. So I think there is a lot of movement. I think there are a lot of responsible leaders. It's just about making sure they are supported by the right ecosystem in order to do that. For example, when I started, I decided I wanted to be part of this accelerator. One of the things that I wanted, and it's not environmental, it's more on the social side, but I wanted to have diversity into the startup, and it was tough, right? Because, only Oxford, only climate with diversity, it was difficult, very difficult. But yet everybody around me, they told me, okay, do you think you can do it without sacrificing quality? And everybody worked with me in order to get diversity into the cohorts. And so it's important to build alliances. I think, Chris, before, being my colleague, is also a supporter, right? And I feel like I'm the same for him. Like I agree on his idea, I support his ideas, and I always, I just trust him in doing the best for the program and for the cohort. And for organization is the same. You need to have a strong leader, but you need this leader to be surrounded by people that support him and actually, help him or her make hard decisions, because otherwise it's just impossible to make change.
So it's supporting and challenging, right? I think they're two sides of the same coin to a degree.
Yeah, I think Chris also challenges me a lot. He's not just
that's great, yeah.
But I think that's why we work so well together. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic insight into leadership in general as well. Having the right kind of structure to support you, but also people on your right and your left who are close to you that will actually challenge your views and push you guys collectively to do better. Exactly. But no, it's been an absolutely fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed it. I know we do have to jump off soon, but if you guys wanted to do any kind of final calls to action, please go ahead.
I just think we were reflecting on this before, James. I think we want to tell people not to be afraid to start companies, in the sense that it's much easier to work for somebody else. Definitely, is safer. You have a higher salary. Chris was talking about a 6x before, if not more. It's a different lifestyle, right? But the entrepreneurs are the people that are changing the world. Are not the politicians. Is not the academia. People that are actually changing the world are the entrepreneurs that have, and they are brave enough to kind of push for their ideas, build companies out of it, employ people, make the economy grow, make the economy, work and create wealth. So I think is being an entrepreneur is one of the most fascinating jobs in the world. And we know that it's difficult, but we're there to support. So a lot of the time that I spend with my startups is not on the strategy, is more on the kind of leadership side, because they are struggle, they want to quit, they're burning out. So we are there for you. We know what it means to be a founder. So we want to support. And at the same time, I think we need to be honest with each other. I think, being in a job that, gives you financial stability, which is very important, but kills your intellectual capital and kills, your kind of curiosity, and it's just not worth it. I mean, this is just one life, right? So I think it's important for all of us to live it fully.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and I think I'm very much in agreement with Micol regarding that entrepreneurship is pretty much sort of, I think, a really good way to go about trying to solve an issue this big. There's not going to be a single answer. we're looking here at a wicked problem. So our solutions are going to be clumsy, but you need many of them, and you need many innovation and ideas in order to drive towards something that can be a solution. So having said that, I think I would also maybe turn that into an invitation to anyone who's listening to come and check out Planet Positive Lab. We're not one of these closed door accelerators. It's not a secret what's going to happen. We run sessions that are going to be open to others as well to join. So if you're a scientist or an academic or a alum, or if you have some link to Oxford, or if you would like to have a link to Oxford, this is pretty much sort of a call to action, particularly to our friends that have turned into consultants and bankers. This is the time to come back into the ecosystem and find solutions to a very sort of pressing problem called climate change. So we would like to invite everyone to sort of come join, learn more about what is this, without having the obligation to generate a venture, because entrepreneurial activity can take form and shape in many different ways.
No, awesome, guys. Thanks so much, and best of luck with your first cohort.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks, James.
Take care. Bye-bye.